name is Vicki Hershberger, and I coordinate the Health and Healing Program for Torrance Memorial. I also facilitate our caregiver support group, and it is the best part of my job, to be honest. That's why I'm so excited about this presentation on From Safety to Sanity. Rosalind Carter has been quoted of saying, there are 4 types of people in the world. Those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, those who will need a caregiver, and those who have been caregivers. I fit all 4 of those categories. I received a phone call one night, and they said to me, your mother's having a stroke. Can we operate on her? Of course, I said yes. And I sat there wondering, how severe is this going to be? Will she be able to go back to living alone, or will I have to become her caregiver? It was a very severe stroke. She could not live alone. So we moved her in with my grandmother, and I left my job, moved to California to take care of them both for a couple of years. That couple of years turned into 20. And because I was very good at their safety, but not very good at my sanity, I ended up in intensive care, and I needed a caregiver for 5 months. So caregiving can be very precarious if you don't handle it right. They both passed in 2020, and then I had to deal with, who am I if I'm not a caregiver? And so I'm hoping that tonight's presentation, actually I'm certain, because I know these people, is going to give you the tools to help you keep them safe and keep yourself sane. So I am going to read this, who these people are. And I didn't memorize it because, my God, I couldn't have. So Dr. David Hart is a licensed professional clinical counselor with over 20 years of experience working with people living with dementia and their families. Dr. Hart received his PhD in counseling from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and currently holds positions as the Director of Community Health at Always Best Care Senior Services and Director of Clinical Training in the Department of Counseling at California State University, Fullerton, where he is also a faculty member. Dr. Hart is the founding chair of the South Bay Dementia Education Consortium, is co-chair of the Orange County MFT Consortium, and has presented his published research in national and international conferences. Dr. Cristina Moldovan is a licensed clinical psychologist in the Behavioral Health Clinic at Torrance Memorial Physician Network. She earned her doctoral degree at Loma Linda University with an emphasis on health psychology and received her health service psychologist credential through the National Register of Health Service Psychologists. Dr. Moldovan completed her pre-doctoral internship in the Iolahui Rural Hawaii Behavioral Health Internship Training Program in Honolulu and Hilo, Hawaii, and her postdoctoral residency at the Kaiser Permanente North Bay Consortium Postdoctoral Residency Program in Vallejo, California. Dr. Moldovan is passionate about helping people function at their best. She has worked with a wide range of populations, including adults, college students, adolescents, and older adults, conducting individual and group therapy and assessment. Her primary area of interest include positive psychology, the science of happiness, food and weight issues, and mindfulness and self-compassion. She incorporates these interests along with other therapeutic approaches to help patients improve their well-being and relationships with themselves and others. We are going to begin with Dr. David Hart, who I consider a personal friend. And if I were to introduce him personally, I would simply say he is one of the most knowledgeable, kindest, and compassionate human beings that I know. Dr. Hart.
One, two, there we go. I actually cried a little bit. That was so sweet. Thank you so much. What a sweet introduction. I'm thinking to myself, can I live up to all of that? Whoa. So welcome everybody to our presentation. I'm so ecstatic to be here with you tonight, and I feel like I don't want to be over here because you all are over there. So let me come over here to you. So Dr. Moldovan and I just met. We met like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we've been working on this presentation for you. It's a love of ours doing this work, and I think that you're going to definitely walk out of here feeling informed. We've got a ton of information, but a very short amount of time. And guess what? We're both talkers. So, so this should be fun, right? So we're going to talk about safety and sanity. We're going to talk about balanced caregiving. And I know in some ways that sounds like an oxymoron, right? Is it possible to have a balanced caregiving experience? So we're going to give you some tools. We're going to give you some resources. We're going to give you some ideas, and we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to spend too much time on what we're going to cover. You can read it very quickly there, but there will be a lot of information about how to manage stress that's related to your role as a caregiver. And we're also going to talk about how to engage in this process of self-care from an emotional perspective. So those are the two primary areas that we'll focus on tonight. So this is a disclaimer that we have to give. So I'm going to read this. Our presentation, it's meant to be educational, it's meant to be supportive, but it's not the end-all be-all, right? We know something about something, not everything about everything. So it's critical for you to take your questions to your healthcare professionals, because they're going to have a more tailored perspective for your needs and where you are. The other piece of this is the information opinions expressed are the presenters, the two of us, and do not represent the hospital. Is there anything that you want to add to that? Okay. All right, so caregiving by the numbers. I don't know if you can see this. What's up with the lights? Do you want me to move back over here? The people on Zoom can't see me. Bye. See ya. Oh man, you're really cramping my style over here. Okay, can you still hear me? Can you see me? All right. I feel so far away from you though, but closer to those of you out in the interwebs. It's okay, we're good. We don't have a lot of time. So take a look here. You can read some of the screen, right? And so we know there's about 53 million Americans that are providing caregiver services to, unpaid caregiver services to a family member. We're talking about nearly $400 billion of unpaid caregiving. Think about that. That's double the amount that we spend on hospital care. It's double the amount that we spend combined, hospital care and nursing home care combined. So think about that for just a moment, and the productivity and the hours and the blood, sweat, hopefully not blood, but sweat and tears that have been invested into your caregiving process. And I just wanted to double check very quickly. We can read this infographic here, but let's get a sense. How many of you out there identify as a caregiver? Okay. How many of you out there have attended an educational workshop trying to improve your skills as a caregiver? Okay, about half of you. How many of you have found that the skills that you've learned or that have been taught to you have been effective? Uh-oh, we're dropping down. Okay, some have been effective, maybe. Okay, so yes, so this is the process. But one of the things that I really wanted to reinforce for you is that we're more than just caregivers, right? Because I can raise my, and Vicki said something about this earlier. It's a role that we have, and it might also be an important part of who we are as people. But we're also more than that. Who am I outside of my role? Who am I? What's important to me? What matters to me? What drives me? What motivates me? What makes me happy? And so part of what we'll be talking about tonight is, can we have both? Can we be good care partners and also good to ourselves? Can we have both at the same time? And that's our goal, is to help convince you that you can. Now, I'm a huge movie buff, and you probably don't know this movie, but if you do, this is the movie Ghost. Okay, so I've got some laughter here. So I'm a big movie buff, and when I thought about the negative effects of caregiver stress, the first person that came to mind was Whoopi Goldberg. In her role as, I think it was, what was her name? Adam A. Brown, something like that. And anyway, she's basically a psychic, and she's relaying a message from somebody who's passed on, and she's telling this person, Molly, you're in danger, girl. And so I'm saying to you that if you are a caregiver and you are experiencing prolonged exposure to caregiver stress, that it does place you in danger. And that danger can be physical, it can be psychological, it can be emotional. What we know is that caregivers they have an increased risk for depression, anxiety, panic. They have increased somatic challenges, acid reflux, pain in the body, headaches, physical pain. And then, of course, all of the emotional overwhelmedness, right? The frustration, the bouts of feeling not good enough, feeling overwhelmed. And what happens when our body is exposed to high levels of cortisol and adrenaline over a long period of time? And we see the outcome in chronic health conditions that have to be treated for extended periods of time. So just being here today, I think, is giving you the tools on how to manage that stress and live healthier and hopefully longer lives. So what is stress, right? It's this, here's one definition: the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. We all can relate to this, right? When we encounter change outside of what our expectations are. And for those of you who have done any amount of caregiving, you know that's basically what it is. No day looks generally the same. Every day is different. And so then therefore we would encounter these moments of stress, prolonged moments of stress. I'm not going to spend too much more time on this because I think we all know what that looks like and what it feels like. But the point being, stress is manageable, and we're going to give you the tools and techniques to do that. So I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Moldovan, and we'll go from there. You going to come this way?
Yeah, thank you. Can meet you.
I'm going to take my mic too.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Hart. That was amazing. Okay, so we'll start with just some general tips, and then we'll talk about some ways to manage stress in the moment, some ways to manage stress short term, and then some ways to manage stress long term. And then we'll come back to Dr. Hart for some more information. So this is very general. So a lot of you, or some of you have taken courses in caregiving, so yeah, it's a skill, right? It's a learned skill, so being patient with ourselves, taking advantage of the trainings that we have that are available for free online, and more, okay, that are available for free online, and as at TMPN, I think we mentioned we have some free trainings as well. Dr. Hart will go into it later. Asking and accepting for help with caregiving and for ourselves is crucial to be able to get through this. So just a general summary. Okay, so managing stress in the moment. So the first part of regulating stress is acknowledging that we have stress, right? And knowing how to recognize it. So how do we recognize it? Knowing our signs of stress when we're feeling stressed, angry, scared. It's really important to know our signs and our symptoms, and all of us are unique. And so, so what are maybe your unique signs and symptoms? Does our face tend to get, some folks, our face tends to get hot. Maybe we're clenching our jaw or our fists, or our muscles get really tight and we have back pain or neck pain. Maybe our heart is racing. Maybe we're short of breath. So these are some common signs, but yet so many times we don't really notice them, right? We're just kind of getting through it, right? So one way to increase awareness of the symptoms that we're having is to practice what's called mindfulness. And I know this is kind of a buzzword. Has anybody heard of this word before? Okay, does anybody actually practice mindfulness? Okay, all right, I'm seeing some hands, okay. A few of us, wonderful. So we'll start, I think the easiest way to talk about it is just by doing. And so we'll start with an exercise, with a mindfulness exercise. And we will begin, and no worries if you haven't done this before, I'll easily guide you through it. So we'll begin by just closing our eyes if we feel comfortable, or gently lowering our gaze. And let's just take a breath and just get settled into our chair. And now let's just bring to mind the words caregiving, stress. Okay. And now, as we've brought these words to mind, let's check in with our bodies by doing a brief body scan from head to toe, just noticing if we feel anything in our body. So the point of this exercise is not to make anything happen that's not there, but just to notice and be aware of what's happening. So scanning our head, our scalp, our face, our shoulders, our right arm, our left arm, our chest, our belly, our back, our seat, our right leg, our left leg, right foot, left foot. Just checking in and seeing if there's anything there. And if there's not, that's totally okay. Next, we'll check in with our emotions and seeing what emotions are we feeling. Perhaps we're feeling some curiosity, some excitement, maybe calmness or stress. Whatever we're feeling is totally okay. And lastly, let's check in with our thoughts. So let's take a moment just to check in with what kinds of thoughts are going through our mind. Okay, with what kinds of thoughts are going through our mind. It might help to imagine that the mind is like the sky, and that the thoughts that are going through our mind are like clouds floating through the sky. Some thoughts, they may be really heavy and dark, and they may linger, while other thoughts are more gentle, and they're light and fluffy, and they move along quickly. So just tuning in and seeing what kinds of thoughts are going on through our mind at this very moment. And now that we've checked in with our thoughts, our body sensations, our emotions, we can take another breath. And if we've closed our eyes, we can open our eyes and tune ourselves back to the room. And I'm really curious about everybody's experience who tried this. I'm wondering what came up for folks, if anybody felt any discomfort, if any thoughts maybe going through the mind were unpleasant, maybe there was some maybe difficult body sensations that we experienced. Did anybody experience something that was kind of tough? Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so let's do the second part of the exercise. So again now, if we're feeling comfortable, we can close our eyes or gently lower our gaze. And again, take another breath. Get settled in our seat. And now let's shift the focus of attention to our breath. So maybe we take another breath. And maybe noticing where in our body that we feel the breath the most. Maybe we feel the breath in our chest as it rises and falls. Maybe we feel it in the belly. Maybe we feel it in our throat or in our nose. It may help even to put one hand on the belly and one hand on the chest. And just notice the movement of the breath in our body. So let's spend a moment just focusing on the breath as it goes in and as it goes out. It may even help to tell ourselves, breathing in and breathing out. And if the mind drifts away from the exercise, that's totally okay. Sometimes we get distracted by sounds, by thoughts. Totally okay. Just bringing it back to the breath as we breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Good. So now let's do another quick check. Checking in with our body sensations, scanning our body, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Scanning our emotions, our mind for our thoughts, and just seeing if we notice anything. What are we noticing? And now taking another breath and expanding our attention to our body, sitting in the chair, the sounds in the room, and if we closed our eyes, opening our eyes and tuning back to the room. Just noticing now, is there a shift from when we did the first exercise to now? Did anyone notice any shifts? Yeah? Okay. Great. I don't know if we can do shout outs, but any positive shifts, negative shifts? By thumbs? Okay, I see a positive thumb, a positive thumb. Okay, awesome. Positive thumbs. Great, thank you. Okay, wonderful. So the reason mindfulness tends to have a positive impact on us, because one of the things that it does, so in everyday life, most of us tend to be like this little human there, right? We've got a ton of things going on through our mind. Our mind is literally full of stuff, right? It's exhausting, right? We're always thinking about what's next. What do I have to do after this? What did I do before this? What am I going to do tomorrow? Right? It's just like a million different thoughts, right? But with mindfulness, which is like the little dog over here, what we did in this exercise, we literally, this is a dog, right? It's focusing on the present moment. So what's happening now in this very moment, right? And so that's exactly what we just did now. We focused on our breathing, which can only happen in the present, right? We can't breathe in the future. We can't breathe in the past. And so we brought our attention back to what is happening now, what's happening in our body, in our mind, our emotions, and our breath. So they say anxiety tends to be always worrying about the future. We're living in the future. What if, right? Depression is kind of like ruminating on the past. And they're kind of best friends because we worry about that the past will happen again in the future, right? So they hang out together. So in either case, the mind is not in the present. So they say happiness tends to lie in the present. So this is something that mindfulness can do, is just bring us back to what's actually happening now. Not what had happened, not what will happen, but what's happening now. So this is mindfulness. So we'll start with managing stressful techniques in the moment. So let's say we're having a tough moment, right? And we're really, really activated. So in moments like this, it can be really hard to say, okay, let me just check in with my emotions, take a breath, right? It can be really hard, right? We're about to lose our temper, right? Or, we're just feeling really, really activated. And this can happen, right? A lot of things can trigger us. Our kid just broke our favorite vase, right? So we're upset, right? So we have levels of being upset. So when we're so upset, we're so activated, it can be hard to practice mindfulness. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to practice what's called grounding. So grounding is kind of like this tree over here. So grounding helps us stay rooted in the present while all the storms of life are coming at us, just like the tree. So there's different ways that we can practice grounding. One of our favorite ways to do it in our practice is by focusing on our senses. And so focusing on things that we can see, touch, hear, smell, and taste. So let's actually practice this. So if everybody could just look around for 5 things that you can see, and you can count them on your fingers maybe. Okay. And now let's look around for 4 things that you can touch. So anything that's around you, except for your neighbor, unless they want to be touched, make sure you ask permission. But yeah, so 4 things that you can touch and just really noticing the texture. So like right now I'm feeling the texture of this podium. I'm feeling and it's kind of bumpy. It's woody, it's bumpy, and it has some jagged edges. I'm feeling this, I can't remember the name for it, but it's basically the slide changer. So I'm feeling this in my hand. It's very smooth. I can touch my arm, my hand, and I can touch my clock, okay? And then the next thing is 3 things that we can hear. So for this one, it might help sometimes to close our eyes, because sometimes it seems like, oh, maybe there's not that many sounds. But for example, right now, maybe we can hear my voice, the humming of the projector, and maybe anything else that you might hear around you, maybe the sound of your breath, the sound of the person chewing gum next to you, whatever sounds that we might be hearing. Some people like to carry around a grounding object, to carry an item with them that helps them stay grounded. So we would use our senses to kind of focus on this object. We would hold it, we would smell it, so we would kind of engage our senses. And what this exercise does is when we feel like intense emotions and energy, they're usually felt here in the back of our brain called the amygdala, which is like the flight or fright center, and it basically like alerts us to danger, or the limbic system. So these are the 2 primary parts of our brain. What happens when we practice this exercise, it basically redirects the brain energy to different parts of the brain. So the parts of the brain that are detecting sight, the parts of the brain that are detecting hearing, right? The parts of the brain that are detecting touch. So it basically reduces the energy in the emotional brain, right? And it redistributes the energy. So this is why this grounding exercise really helps us to kind of reduce that intensity of the emotion. A butterfly hug is another grounding exercise. This one's used in EMDR therapy. And this one, it goes like this. So you basically link your thumbs like this, and you hold your hands up to your chest. Yeah, just like that. And then you just tap. So we can all tap together. So tap, 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 tap. Good. So this is a grounding strategy taken from EMDR therapy, and the idea behind the strategy is that it engages our brain in bilateral stimulation. So it engages our left brain and our right brain. So sometimes emotions can be stored in one part of the brain, and the other part of the brain is a little more logical. So this part kind of helps bring them in together, and it helps to reduce, again, that intensity of the emotion. Another grounding activity that we won't do just for the sake of time, I try to condense what I do in like weeks and months of therapy into like these few slides. So we don't have time to do a lot of this stuff, but I'll kind of explain to you the things that we won't do. But taking 5 breaths, counting each in-breath. 1. Oh, I guess that was counting the out-breath, but that's okay. It doesn't matter really. But you count 1, and then if you lose track, the trick is to start over. Sometimes this can be really hard to do. We lose track a lot because the mind gets distracted a lot. Luckily, there's an app for that. So the Calm app has a really great breathing bubble, but if you don't want to pay for it, you can literally search Calm breathing bubble on YouTube, and it will tell you breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and you can literally just watch the bubble and breathe with the bubble. It's kind of cool. Okay, another grounding strategy that we can do, it's very simple. It's jumping up and down. So all our energy when we're super stressed or super activated is in our brain, right? Our feet are the furthest thing away from our brain. So engaging our feet with the ground, like the tree, can be a very quick way to get us present and deactivated. So jumping up and down. Y'all can try this right now by maybe stomping your feet. Yeah, go ahead and stomp your feet. Let's all get grounded a little bit. Okay, good. Awesome, good job. Oh, I like it. She's jumping in the back. Yay! Woohoo! Awesome, that was great. Thank you. You just made my night. Okay, and then water can be also used for grounding. Water is like a fantastic grounding tool. Let's say we're at a restaurant, we're feeling really activated, or where, I mean, we have water, we're very blessed to have water almost everywhere, right? So running hot water over our hands or cold water in our hands, paying attention to the sensations, the temperature, the heat can be an excellent way to ground. Yoga and stretching, amazing for grounding also. So these are in the moment grounding techniques to get us kind of deactivated if we're feeling super activated. So after we get deactivated, it's really important though to come back to the emotion. So what we did earlier in the mindfulness exercise, it's really, really important to check in with what we're feeling and make sure that we're dealing with the feeling. And also important to give ourselves permission to feel. And the reason that this is important, because we know that if we tend to keep emotions inside, they tend to turn into depression, anxiety, physical health issues, emotions that we tend to externalize, or sometimes anger, rage, violence, right? And so making sure that we're checking in with our emotions. Has anyone been really upset and you snap at somebody and then you instantly regret it? Anybody? Or was it just me? Yeah, okay. Right. So checking in with the feeling, right? Checking in with it before we react to it, right? That's so when we do that, I'll rewind a little bit. So when we snap at somebody, that's the emotion taking the wheel of the bus, right? That's driving our life, right? So when we snap at somebody, the emotion takes over what we want. We want the emotion there, but we want to make sure we're in charge of how it gets expressed, right? And so there's a difference between feeling an emotion and expressing an emotion, because we might feel anger, but if I express my anger by, snapping at somebody, that's not okay, right? It's okay to feel anger, but I have to find ways to deal with the anger. So there's also an app for that, and a book. So amazing. There's an amazing app called How We Feel that helps us checking with our emotions, and it also gives us coping skills for each emotion. So it's fantastic. I recommend doing it all the time. The research at Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence found that the more specific we're able to get about what we're feeling, the more we're better able to figure out what we need from that feeling, what's that emotion trying to tell us, and what we need. So typically every emotion has different messages. So for example, sadness tells us that we need comfort and connection. Fear tells us that we need safety and protection. Anger tells us that there's been an injustice and that some wrong needs to be righted. So every emotion, even though some of them may feel uncomfortable, may to give some kind of message. So listening to that message and then asking ourselves, what do we need? Whether it's a hug, a walk, or just to take a breath. So this is why emotions matter. So from cognitive behavioral therapy, we know that emotions, feelings tend to come from thoughts. So we have a thought, like in that first exercise that we did, I said caregiver stress. I wonder if that resulted in certain emotions, right? So thoughts trigger emotions. So it's really important to check in with our thoughts, which is why we did that also in that first exercise, because sometimes our thoughts can amplify our emotions, right? We have a thought, we feel the emotion, and then we keep thinking about it, which makes the emotion stronger. Right? So we all have these what's called unhelpful thinking habits. And so they're like ways of thinking that maybe aren't super helpful. So checking in with ourselves and asking ourselves like if we're doing any of this, right? So these are some of the most common unhelpful thinking habits. So like, are we convinced that the absolute worst thing is going to happen? That's called catastrophizing. So we can say, okay, I'm catastrophizing right now. Are we convinced that we can read someone's mind and that we know exactly what they're thinking about us, typically, and it's probably not good, right? That's mind reading. Are we predicting that something really bad's gonna happen in the future? Like, oh my gosh, like, if I, fail this presentation, my career is gonna be ruined forever, right? Prediction, right? That's fortune telling. But last time I checked, only a few of us have psychic abilities, right? And so most of us aren't fortune tellers, but yet we all tend to do fortune telling. Are we engaging in all or nothing thinking? This is also called black and white thinking. It's like we think, everything, a lot of us tend to see the world in black and white, like, oh, this is really good, like, they're the coolest person ever, or like, oh, like, this is the worst restaurant ever, right? We're so extreme, but in reality, the world is more gray. And so getting more comfortable with the gray, putting ourselves down, comparing ourselves to others, the shoulds, the musts, right? Are we checking in with those? Are we doing this? Is it helping us or is it hurting us, right? Are we putting too many demands on ourselves, learning to be kind to ourselves? And Dr. Hart will be talking about self-compassion a little bit more in a few minutes. So next, after we check in, maybe ask ourselves, are we thinking maybe
are we using a thinking pattern? Maybe that's not that helpful. We can also really challenge the validity of our thoughts. We tend to believe that what we think is absolute truth, but in reality, that's not the case, right? And so it's important to really look at the facts. What's the evidence for this thought? So if we think something really terrible is going to happen, what's the evidence? Let's look at the facts. How likely is it to happen? And then we can also try to see if we look at another perspective. Is there another way to look at this? If one of my friends was going through this, what would I tell them? Right? Seeing a different perspective. And then lastly, if it does happen, okay, let's face that fear. Then what? Then what will I do about it? Right? So anxiety is it has two components. So the first component is thinking something really bad is going to happen. And the second part of the equation is thinking I'm not going to be able to deal with it. But if we say, okay, well, if that terrible thing does happen, how would I deal with it? That takes a part of the equation out for the anxiety, because now we have a plan, right? So this is why, if this happens, what will I do about it? Making a plan is actually okay. Sometimes there can be a million, different things that could happen, so it may not be possible to make a plan for everyone, but then I would go back to the top options that we've talked about. Okay, I think I have about 7 minutes. All right, we're good. Okay, and so let's say sometimes our thoughts are just racing, and we're not even able to notice our thoughts, right? They're just spinning. So in that case, let's try to use grounding. If grounding doesn't work, writing down every thought for 3 minutes that you're having. So sitting down, putting a timer on for 3 minutes, just write down every single thought. And it's okay, our mind goes racing sometime. We have a lot of stuff going on, no worries. So just writing down every thought, okay? And then this is one of my favorite exercises to do for a racing mind. And so if you all would entertain me and do this exercise with me, please. I'll first demonstrate. This is called bumblebee breath. So for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to cover our eyes like this with our hands, and then we're going to cover our eardrums with both of our thumbs, so that we're basically tuning out any kind of external stimuli. So we're not seeing anything, we're not hearing anything. And then what we do next is we're gonna take a deep breath, and as we release the breath, we're gonna go, okay, so that's bumblebee breath. So we can all try it. So let's all put our hands on our eyes like this, and then cover our eardrums. And because we'll all be deaf and we won't be hearing each other, it's totally okay. and we'll do it together. So now we'll cover eardrums. Let's expel the air that we have. And then let's take in a deep breath. Good, some people already got started. Let's do this. So we'll take in a deep breath, then expel. And another one. Breathing in and expel. And one more. Breathing in and expel. Oh, breathing in. Expel. All right, thank you all for being bumblebees with me. Okay, so that's bumblebee breath, tuning out all stimuli. So if our minds are just going, and this is one that we can use in any situation, but it's good for the racing mind. So the last couple slides, I'll just be talking about some stuff that y'all probably have heard before, so I'll try to stick to the points that are kind of original. So we know that nature is a very powerful remedy, and yet despite all the research and despite the fact that 99% of our existence as humans, we lived in nature, the Environmental Protection Agency reported that most Americans spend 93% of their time indoors. And so so that was really shocking to me to hear that. We know that nature is great for reducing stress, cortisol levels, blood pressure, heart rate. It just has these amazing benefits. So it's great for grounding nature. We can, smell a flower, touch a tree trunk, listen to the birds, right? Using our senses. Sitting outside in the sunshine for 5 minutes, we can get that vitamin D that helps fight off a battle of diseases, including depression. We can, and if we have problems getting outside, the really cool thing is is that even fake nature has been shown to benefit. So even having nature on TV, they did this research study with people who watched Planet Earth videos, and they found that folks who watched the Planet Earth videos had a greater sense of perspective, reported a greater sense of well-being, and had all these benefits. So even if we don't have nature outside, we can maybe keep nature on the smart screen of our TV. There's a lot of good apps. I think there's actually one called Nature on the Amazon TV app. That's wonderful. Calm is a great app that has a bunch of nature scenes. There's also an app called Better Sleep. And if we can't get outside, just looking outside the window. There's a research study done that people who have windows in workplaces, they're more productive, they're happier, they have an overall better health. They even did this study in prisons, and they found that people whose prison windows face like the indoor courtyard versus the outdoor farm fields, they tended to have a lot more health problems, the ones who had the windows facing the indoor courtyard. So just looking at nature, just even if it's fake nature, even if it's not, you're not in front of it, can still be really beneficial. So if we can't get outside, maybe keeping a plant nearby, looking out the window. So yeah, nature is very powerful. So enough talking about it. Let's just take a moment to just experience nature, so you can just focus on the instructions in the video for the next few moments. All right. How was that for everybody? Yeah? Okay. Anyone also from Seattle and kind of traumatized by that video like me? No? Okay. All right. So we did that. Okay, so now I'll go through the rest of these slides really quickly because I know my time is running out. Short-term strategies to manage stress. These things are going to make us feel wonderful in the moment. Planning a vacation. How many of us would like to go here? Planning a date night, outing with friends. For parents, doing a babysitting exchange. I'll watch your kids this weekend, you watch my kids next weekend, so we both get a weekend off. 3 good things: showing gratitude, writing a gratitude letter of thank you for somebody who's done something nice for you and giving it to them has shown to have enormous benefits on mood and health. Writing down 3 good things that happen every day, same thing, enormous benefits on moods and health, and I wish I could go into more detail, but those 3 things cannot be the same. So that's kind of the unique part there. Adult coloring books have been helpful, journaling, going on a hike, massage, mani-pedi, the standard self-care stuff that Dr. Hart will touch on later. Having a good cry can be such a great stress relief management technique. So here's a quote. We can just skip past it, but just like we charge our cell phones, we really need to recharge ourselves. So long-term habits. So as we talked about, practicing checking our emotions daily, practicing that mindfulness that we talked about, checking in with our mind, our body, our emotions. Really quick stress management exercise. So if you're doing the check-in, you're doing the mindfulness, and you find that there's tension in the body, you can do what's called drop 3. So you can just drop your jaw, your shoulders, and your belly. So you can all try it with me now. Let's all drop our jaw, our shoulders, and our belly. And just notice how that makes you feel. Okay. Anyone notice anything? Anything good? Okay, awesome. Okay, and savoring is basically just like we savor a really good meal. We can savor any life experience. So we all have so many stressful life experiences that we tend to remember more than the good stuff. So making it a point to remember the good stuff. So if we are having an amazing meal, not taking out our smartphone, right, and like checking our email, right? Really focusing on that moment, using that mindfulness to be in that moment, doing regular relaxation practice. We don't have time to do visualization exercises, but there's a link from YouTube, and you can search that and find a lot. Kind, positive self-talk, so countering that self-criticism with praise, right? We're so easy to blame ourselves for all the stuff that we've done wrong, but we don't really give ourselves credit for the things we've done right? And so just learning to give ourselves praise for the small things that we do that aren't really that small, right? Like, good job for doing laundry, right? Good job for checking the mail and paying that bill. So just finding ways to give ourselves praise for all the 1,000 times that we blame ourselves for not doing this right or not doing that right, or I forgot to do that, or I should have done that, right? So much of that we're constantly repeating in our head. And what does that do to us? So Dr. Hart will touch more on self-compassion a bit. We all know physical activity is really good for our bodies. A lot of people don't know it's good for our minds. They actually did this study where they showed that 45 minutes of high-intensity activity, so like cycling, walking, jogging, 3 times a week was just as effective as an antidepressant. And people who were in the exercise group were actually less likely to relapse 10 months later. And so movement, I think any kind of movement, exercise kind of tends to be associated with like the gym and stuff like that. So the idea is just moving. So finding something that we enjoy is key, because if we don't like it, we're not going to do it. And so it can be anything like a YouTube dance party. It can be chair workouts if we have difficulty with mobility. It can be taking a walk with a friend in the park. Anything that we enjoy. And if we have a hard time finding something we enjoy, maybe thinking, what did I like as a kid? Did I like bike riding? Did I like playing soccer? And finding and making use of that. And these are just long-term ways to manage stress. Positive social connections is the #1 predictor of a long, healthy life. It was a study done in Harvard. Since 1930, they've been following thousands of people. So they found that the #1 predictor of a long, healthy life is having positive social connections with the top 3 to 5 people in your life. And then setting boundaries, Dr. Hart will talk more about that. Getting alone time for prayer, meditation, spiritual support, sleeping well, eating well, which does not mean being on a diet and feeling like you have to eat healthy all the time, but it means just listening to your body. How does this food make me feel? Does it make me feel good? Not so good? Do I like this? Do I not like this? And then connecting with our values and purpose, which Dr. Hart will also get to next. So all that being said, again, thank you all for your time. Back to Vicki.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moldovan. That was wonderful. Did you learn something? Yes. Yeah, can you use what you learned? Okay. So I'm going to bring us down a little bit here. It's a lot of information, right? And I think what I hear in my practice a lot is caregivers coming in and feeling like they're just not meeting the mark, right? That they've got so much going on, all of the tasks related to caregiving. And then we're encouraging you to take these tools and add more tasks, right? And I wonder if some of you are feeling like, oh my gosh, can I really take on 1 or 2 or 3 more activities? The answer is yes, and sometimes no, right? It's going to depend on the energy levels that you have, the context of the care that you're providing, the circumstances will all absolutely matter. But the point is that we're developing these toolkits, right? That you have tools that you can access when you need them. And these are all evidence-based strategies that some of you will be able to incorporate. I'm going to be talking about setting boundaries. And I want us to think about kiddos. How many of you have a kiddo somewhere in your life now, a niece, a nephew, a grandkid, a friend, a neighbor, somebody that you know that's maybe, toddler age, or you can recall knowing a toddler at some point in your life. What is the toddler's favorite word? No. And when we think about the word no, can you hear just imagine a toddler saying to you, no, I'm not going to do that. There's power in the word no. And no is the first word that we learn that helps us to differentiate ourselves from others. And when we're caregiving, when we're in the role of caregiver, I have never, ever once in my life, well, maybe once, but mostly the caregivers, and I'm sure Vicki can attest to this, and anybody who runs a caregiver support group for the years that we have, most caregivers are A+ caregivers. They strive and they push and they grind to give the absolute best care that they can give. Doesn't mean that it's always perfect, but it often is to the detriment of their own health. And Vicki talked about this earlier. And I'm sure many of you can resonate with that. As I was sitting over there, I have so many slides here, but you'll have to indulge me because I'm a professor, and professors like to tell stories. So I'm going to tell a story. I was thinking about my grandmother, actually, as I was sitting there. And I was thinking about the 8 years of caring for her as she progressed through the stages of Alzheimer's. And there were moments for sure that were terrible. And then there were moments that were hysterical. But this particular moment, as I'm thinking about setting boundaries, we had to take the keys away from her because she got lost. She was driving 3 blocks in Redondo Beach from my mother's home to her home. And 5 hours later, she turned up in Hollywood. And thank goodness that there was a kind gentleman at the front desk of a motel who thought to look in her wallet to see the card that indicated that she had dementia. So they called and we got her back. We took her keys away. She was pretty upset about that. She didn't like that. And to get back at us, particularly me, she decided that if I was to drive her to and from, that I would wear a chauffeur's cap. So I did. What was problematic about this experience, though, is because I was her chauffeur, that meant that she had to sit in the back seat of her 1984 Buick Regal, 2-door Buick Regal. Let's just say it was very difficult to get her in and out of the back seat, but we did it anyway. And so I'd tool her down to the store. She loved to go to Ralph's, and she'd get out and she'd go up and down every single aisle, and she'd look at every single product. Can you imagine how long that would take? Now we're talking about a 3 or 4 hour excursion to Ralph's. Actually more like an expedition. Can you imagine at that time I was an 18, 19, 20-year-old college student? Can you imagine how I may have been feeling as I was expediting with my grandmother? I was feeling angry and frustrated and overwhelmed. And you can probably imagine that some of that anger, frustration, and feeling overwhelmed didn't stay with me. It was expressed. And I think about those times. I remember those times and I regret that I didn't have the emotional fortitude to set a boundary. Because what was happening was an expectation that I had for myself and the caregiver that I was supposed to be, a sacrificial caregiver. That it became a larger part of my identity than my own self, was her well-being. And I want to suggest to you that there's nothing inherently wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I'm very proud of what I was able to do, my mother and I both, to help care for her. But what I'm suggesting is that we can have both. We can sacrifice for our loved ones and also take care of ourselves. It's not an either-or proposition. It's not a zero-sum game. Now, going back to this example, how could I have set the boundary? She had resources. but she refused to get a caregiver. Now, I know because I work, part of what I do is in a family company that's focused on home care. And we've been doing it for 14 years, and I can tell you this 100%, well, maybe not 100%. Let's say 98% of our clients, they don't want caregivers either. None of them do. Very few come to us and say, we want a caregiver. Most of the time it's, I've got to have one, right? And 98% of those 98% end up really liking the care that they receive. So the boundary that I could have set for myself is that Grandma, I called her Jaw, caregiver's taking you to the grocery store. Because I need to do some other things for me. And that still would have held both the dialectical, right? That we can have both values at the same time. So setting boundary is critical. Now I'm going to tell you a very funny story as I move forward here, and I'm going to have to do a couple of skips here. What time is it? I'm running out of time, but stories are good. I couldn't get her out of the back seat on one of those expeditions. Couldn't get her out. I was pulling, she was pushing, and she was laughing hysterically. She thought it was the funniest thing. And of course, I thought it was the worst thing that had ever happened. You're wasting my time. And she was laughing so hard that she piddled in the back seat, right on the mat. And then I thought to myself, oh my gosh, now I've got to clean that up too. But she was laughing so hard and was so in joy, that I couldn't help but break all of that anger and frustration and feeling overwhelmed. And I sat down in the gutter and held her hand, and I laughed too. But this time we weren't making puddles of pee. We were making puddles of happy tears. So this idea that setting boundaries is going to be potentially harmful is probably a cognitive distortion. It's something that we can learn how to do. I'm going to move very quickly to this. I'm just going to give you one technique, and this is what I want you to practice. Setting boundaries is about pausing and asking yourself, is this decision right for me too? Is this decision right for me too? That's what I'm asking you to do. My invitation for you to consider is just integrating yourself into the equation. The old adage, place the oxygen mask on you first and then on your loved one. It's because in order for them to survive, you must survive. Now let me tell you how we got the title of the talk. Safety and Sanity. This is coming directly to you from 20 years of caregivers that I have served in caregiver support groups. 20 years. I've learned a lot in 20 years. And we had a mantra. And the mantra always was, as we were looking to make a decision or help each other to make a decision related to caregiving, is your loved one safe? And when we think about safety, we're thinking about physical, psychological, sexual, financial, and that they're not neglected. Is your loved one safe? Yes? Great. The next question is, are you sane? That's a big question, right? Are you sane? Please take note that nowhere in the equation, this particular equation, are we asking, is your loved one happy? Your loved one's happiness is tertiary to your sanity. I want you to hear that again. Your loved one's happiness is tertiary to your sanity. It's secondary. Now, we never want to treat our loved ones like children. Never. It's inappropriate and it's disrespectful. But we can conceptualize working with older adults who need our care, or spouses, whatever they have, whoever they are to you. We can think about working with them like working with kids. Sometimes kids need to be told no. And sometimes kids are gonna throw a fit, but they're still safe, just unhappy. And that's okay. I'm not in any way suggesting that happiness of you or your loved one is not important. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not advocating for that. It's absolutely important. But it's lower on the list than your sanity. I know we're out of time, Mary. What are you going to tell me, Mary? 5 minutes? Okay. This point about guilt, have you been taught about the difference between shame and guilt? Shame is the experience of, I am bad. Guilt is the experience of, I've done something bad. So you have to check in with yourself, not just with yourself, but also in consultation with others. This is why caregiver support groups are so effective, because of the consultative component. You get to reality test with one another and to check in. So, am I a bad person? For doing what? Was I a bad person because I was angry with my grandmother for spending 4 hours at the grocery store? No. Do I feel guilty? Did I do something bad? At the time I thought so, but now I know that the system was kind of rigged. I shouldn't be responsible all the time for taking care of my loved one. Sometimes I need additional support. And that's why respite care is so critical, but who can afford it? Right? Who can afford it? Not very many people. So just know, I learned this 25 years ago from Oprah Winfrey. It's stuck with me all these years, right? If you want to manage guilt, do your homework and make a decision that's based on your values. If your decision is responsive, that you are thinking about your own values and what's important to you and the best information possible, then that will help to reduce or maybe eliminate the guilt that you experience. But it doesn't need to be your North Star, folks. We have all sorts, a range of emotions and a range of feelings. We don't have to allow guilt to be the absolute North Star. Okay, just let's do a couple self-compassion points. Add ouch to your vocabulary. If it hurts, let it hurt. You don't have to be super person. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the best at what you do all the time. We can come from the space of good enough. Good enough. This is what we share with our caregivers. It doesn't have to be A+. You know what I tell my students that are working full time and in clinical practicum and taking 3 classes and all this stuff? I look at them and I'm like, you all are crazy. You are going to need each other, absolutely. You're going to keep us all in profession because you're going to lose your mind and go crazy. And then I tell them, B's get degrees. And B's will get you through caregiving too. It doesn't have to be an A+. It could even be a C. Come on. Just don't let it be a D or an F. Get curious about your anger. Anger does tell you something important about boundaries. If you're not setting appropriate boundaries, you likely will be filled with anger. And so you have to go back to what's important to you. So to know more about yourself, just very quickly, know your values. My top values: humility, service, spirituality, community. So as I'm making decisions, even tonight, I want you to notice that the decision that I made tonight to slow this process down for me is based on a value. The value is community. We all have choice. The choices aren't necessarily always feel good. They might not always land perfectly. And we all have choices to make. So know your values, and when you're making decisions, filter those decisions through what's important to you. What matters to you? I'm happiest when I'm with my people. I feel most like myself when I am teaching. I am bound to fail when I'm tired. Go check out your community resources out there, folks. Get into a support group. Do it. I promise you, I promise, and I don't promise much, but I promise you they work and you will find support. Hey y'all, if you want to take my Caregiving Essentials class and you've got your phone out, scan that barcode right there, that QR code. You can register right now. But Torrance Memorial has a caregiver group that they do. When's it start, Vicki? Did it start?
Oh, it's ongoing.
It's ongoing. So come talk to Vicki or Charmone about the Torrance Memorial Caregiver Support Program. It's wonderful. UCLA has a program. Alzheimer's Association has a program. We're all doing something for caregivers. If you want to come learn from me some more, there you go. When to seek help, folks. If you're feeling hopeless, if you're feeling helpless, if you're lacking sleep, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, eating too much, not eating enough, feeling irritable, angry, folks are telling you that you're looking like you're struggling. You wake up in the morning and you're feeling like, today doesn't look like a good day. And this is happening more days than not. Seek support, professional support. Talk to your healthcare provider. All right. Whew. That's my information. Now, if you want information from Always Best Care, you could scan another QR code, or you can just let us know at the table back there. Dr. Moldovan's information is there. We really enjoyed talking with you tonight. I'm curious, did you learn something tonight? Are you feeling like you're walking out of here like you can use what you learned? Are you feeling understood? Yeah? All right. We appreciate you. Seek out support. Be in community. That's my advice. All right. Vicki, you want to take it over? Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
That was a lot of amazing information. And I'm sure some of you have questions for these two beautiful people. So we're going to take a 2 to 3 minute break, and you can get some water to refresh yourself, some coffee to wake you up, and some cookies. And those of you who chose to do this on Zoom, you get none of that. So next time, come here live. All right, so let's take a break, and there are people walking around with little pieces of paper, and if you have questions, you can write those down. They'll come to me, and I'll feed them to them. Okay, that was a little longer than 2 to 3 minutes. So if we could come back, and we can collect if there are any more questions. I gotta get my water. So I've got to get my presenters up here. Hello, David. Yes. We. Okay, I think you guys did such a great job that people are like, I've got it all. I have no questions. We've got 3 though. So the first one was, please discuss music as a grounding means.
Hello? Okay, hi. So I'd love a few more details about that question, I guess. I think music can be used as grounding. Obviously, it's sound, right? And I think music is very powerful. Music, certain kind of music sometimes can match our emotions. Sometimes I have folks make playlists for every emotion. So when you're feeling angry, maybe we play anger songs so that we're able to, express that emotion in a healthy way. And so I think, yeah, music can be great for grounding. It's a way to engage the sense of sound. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Hart?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Sound is an olfactory sense. And so for those of you who are caring for a person with dementia, you know that music is a profound way to engage reminiscence. And we all know, and so reminiscence is particularly joyful reminiscence. Right? And we're helping, and that's what we're attempting to do as we enrich the lives of people with dementia, is to give them joy, to help them to enjoy the moments that they have, where they're connected to themselves. And music can do that, can connect you to a time and a place, a memory, that brings a sense of happiness. So music is profound. And also from the beginning of, the human incarnation, music is a way that we build community. So I just think about the sacred drum, right? And hearing that rhythm and feeling that rhythm like a heartbeat. Oh, it's primal, it's primitive, and it's certainly grounding.
Okay, next question. Your thoughts on relieving stress through floating, sensory deprivation tanks, and also cryotherapy.
I don't know the research on this, to be frank. But I can imagine, floating, not feeling the weight of my body. Yeah, I like that idea. So I guess I experienced something like that on roller coasters, right? When you're in G-force or whatever. I like that feeling. But I don't know the research on it, sorry. Do you know the research or anything about that?
I don't know a lot of, so they asked how we feel about them being used for stress management.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it depends on the individual. I think some folks with floating may feel a little anxiety. Oh, okay, it's back. Yeah, so if some folks who are maybe claustrophobic, or it can. I think different strokes for different folks. I don't know the research on it either for relaxation. But I know cryotherapy, right? It's very cold temperatures, right? So that can be good for grounding. I don't know what the research is on relaxation.
I do have a student who does the plunge every day. So he's plunging into 45-degree water, and will stay there for 2 to 5 minutes, and he reports powerful benefits, lower levels of stress, but especially higher degree of focus. So there's that.
Okay, next question. The title of the seminar is 4-Pillar Approach. Will you please name the 4 pillars?
Oh, that's hard. The 4 pillars are stress management. Pillar 1, stress management. Pillar 2, self-care. Pillar 3, community support. And pillar 5, technical knowledge. So as you're thinking about balancing your self-care repertoire, learning to do those things, in order to make good decisions, you have to have good information. So that's the technical knowledge piece. In order to learn, or in order to access community support, you have to be in community. Support group is the way to go, y'all. Did I answer your question? I think so.
You answered my question.
All right.
All right, the last one is, unless somebody else has come up with something, and if so, write it down fast and get it up here. It says, knowing most of all of these things, how does one remind oneself of this question, of this? Oh, how does one remind oneself of this? Is there a simple mnemonic device to stop and engage all of this knowledge?
I wish. I really do. What I would suggest is, as we both mentioned, there's a lot of information, and even when it's good stuff, it can still be really overwhelming. And so what I would recommend is, we have the slides, so you're welcome to take them and go back to them, but maybe think about when we were going through these exercises and talking about this stuff, what resonated most with you? And then I really like baby steps. So I say pick one thing that you like the best, one thing that's gonna be the easiest, and maybe just start incorporating that to daily practice. So if it's checking in with my feelings, maybe we download the app, right? Maybe if it's setting boundaries, maybe we make a goal to say no once a day to something, right? Would you like some fries with that? No, right? So picking maybe one thing from everything that you got tonight, and maybe starting with that, practicing that, and getting really, and then once you feel like, okay, I got this thing down, I'm checking in with my feelings now. I'm good at kind of like challenging some of my thoughts that are coming up, or I'm saying no to maybe things that aren't serving me or based on my values, then maybe try the other stuff. Yeah, so that's my suggestion, because I think when we try to make too many changes at one time, it tends to kind of backfire, right? It's kind of like, on New Year's, and people make all these New Year's resolutions. There's a bunch of research backing up that most of us don't keep them, right? So I like the gym memberships, spike at the beginning of the year and then they decline. But so just picking one thing, one simple thing to do, one thing that really stuck with you, and then going there. So that's my feedback on that question.
If I had to pick one strategy that I would encourage you to practice, is the breathing activities. That I think is going to really help you to manage your stress if you can learn how to harness your breath, because it engages the parasympathetic nervous system. Learning how to harness your breath will take you a long, long way. In terms of an acronym, I just recalled Dr. Martin Seligman's theory of positive psychology, which many of these techniques and tools were developed through his research lab and his colleagues in positive psychology, but there is an acronym actually. It's called PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. I could not remember for the life of me what PERMA stood for, but I remembered PERMA. I'll just blame that on my pandemic brain. Okay, so PERMA, P stands for positive emotions. So we talked a lot about that tonight. How do you engage in activities and boundary setting and self-care and self-compassion that allows you to experience positive emotions? Engagement is the E. So where are you engaged and with what are you engaged? Who and what and where? You are engaged tonight with me and with Dr. Moldovan and the rest of you, yes. I'm so self-centered. The R is relationships. What relationships matter most to you? And right, that the study on adult development out of Harvard, right? It's the longest study on adult development ever conducted. And what does the research tell us? That people who are connected in meaningful relationships live longer, bar none. That's it. And you know that loneliness is now considered a chronic health condition in the United States. That the most lonely of us are as sick, essentially, as folks who are smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That's the amount of years that are taken off the lives of the most lonely. All right, where were we? M. Can you guess what it's going to be? Mindfulness? That's a good guess. Meaning, yes. Oh, he's pulled it up. Such a diligent student. And then finally, and so meaning making, right? How do we get meaning? And meaning comes from living our values, knowing what our values are. And so remember, it's not, the goal is the objective. The value is how we get there, what we're doing to get the objective. And then finally, it's accomplishment. So never forget that we are primates, and we do have energy. Freud would say we need to sublimate it. We need to do something with that energy, and we would describe that as having purpose. Purpose. That's it.
That's it, unless anybody has something that I haven't been given yet. If not, then I want to thank the two of you for an incredibly informative and fun presentation. I learned a lot. And I want to thank all of you who came out. Thank you. It's such an important topic, well, for me. And it's just wonderful to see you here. And I hope the Zoom people got a lot out of it too. I didn't mean to tease you about the cookies, but something to think about. Thank you.